Okay, this has been one of the Scooby-Dooinest Scooby mysteries I've ever worked on before, and I've had some doozies. I figured with as many Wranglers out here as there are, I'm going to share this one. So, this is an 03 Wrangler 4-liter Dogmatic transmission. The customer complaint was that when he'd start the vehicle, none of the gauges would work until he applied the foot brake. He applied the foot brake, tach would work, everything would work, let off, goes dead. Okay? The other thing that was occurring, the stereo was dead, and when I got to it, let's see if it'll actually come back on. Okay? As long as you don't touch the brake, the stereo works. But when I got to it, it had blown fuses. The radio fuse was blown. This 10 amp fuse for the AC compressor is blown, and that one continues to blow. I'm not even going to mess with it. Somebody else can play with the AC compressor, but it blows the second you turn ignition on with the AC on. And then inside, behind the glove box, it had blown this one, fuse 3, and fuse 10. So the second that I replaced everything, turned on the key, fuse 10 just immediately ignites. And it dies. It kills the fuse immediately. So I did a bunch of research on this and decided the only place that it really actually touches the ground is at the shift solenoid, which, give you some perspective here, sorry. Keys, cable, shift solenoid, 2-pin plug right here, and you can't really get to it, but you can see the white connector and blue, white, and I think it's pink. White, pink, yeah, white, pink. I'm going to set you down for a second while I unplug that. Okay, so I unplugged that plug from the shift solenoid, and now I can put the 10 amp fuse that's marked cluster on the glove box and put this 10 amp fuse back in. And when you start it, everything works. Okay, no more problems. Oh, wait, one more problem. The stereo stops working. Yeah, the same stereo that worked a minute ago until you stepped on the brake no longer works with the fuse in there. So I pulled the stereo out, checked all power, ground, blah, blah, blah back there. I was thinking it might be the PCI. And so I came back over here to this side to look at some stuff, because the PCI comes out of the instrument cluster on this over to here. Why it needs the PCI, I don't know, but it does. So I started researching some more, and at the ignition switch there's a blue wire and a black wire. The light blue here, sorry, trying to keep focus. Light blue here, black here in the very bottom of the ignition switch. So with the vehicle running, this blue wire should have a ground on it. and the logic probe says 12.6, but it's not indicating either way, so it's just kind of floating. The ignition switch is supposed to be sending a ground, sorry guys, I'm fighting doing 6 things at once here, to that light blue wire. Supposed to be sending ground to that light blue wire all the time with the ignition on. So I put the logic probe in, send a ground to that light blue wire. Now I have a working stereo because the ignition switch is shot. So multiple levels of mass confusion here. Bad ignition switch that's not sending out the ground there. Bad shift solenoid off this cable that was grounded out and blowing the heck out of everything. Now the downfall to this, and I guess the quickest way to test whether your shift solenoid's blowing your cluster fuse or not in the future, is that without putting your foot on the brake, and I'm just going to cover the brake, can you shift it into gear? Because you should not be able to shift it into gear. My shift solenoid's unplugged right now, and I can still shift it. So that solenoid's shorted out, which was blowing that fuse, which was backfeeding through everything to get these to come on, which, anyway. So if you have an issue and you don't have a stereo, but the 2 red and white stripe wires at the back of the stereo have voltage on them, and the pink wire has voltage on it, the 2 black wires have ground, but you still have no stereo, I recommend coming over to your ignition switch and check that light blue wire on the very bottom. If you have no instrument lights working, unless you step on the brake, check your cluster fuse over here. If it blows immediately and you have an automatic transmission, unplug the shift solenoid, see if it stops blowing, and if your gauges start working. Have fun.